Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Keemah.G podcast. And thank you for kicking it with me for this next episode. And I'm going to be speaking about actually, I don't know why I say we're like there's more people on this platform besides for me right now. But I'm going to be speaking about ignoring the red flags. So let's get into it. Every red flag that I ignored ended up in the same way. And I still didn't learn. And the worst part about it is that in some situations, I knew better. So the question remains right now. I guess the question is right now, why did I ignore those red flags? And I know exactly why I ignored those red flags because I went back to understand, to reflect, to do the work. And this is what I have came up with. The reason why I ignored those red flags, it's because I wanted that relationship at the time or that situation to work out so much that I ignored the signs that was either telling me something needs to be addressed, something needs to change, or you need to walk away. But because I invested my time, that's another reason why I ignored the red flags, is because I had invested so much time, so much emotions, into the relationship or situation. And when I say situation, I'm talking about things in life. This could be a red flag in a workplace. It could be a red flag in your friendships. It doesn't only have to be a romantic relationships. You know what I'm saying? And I ignored that because whatever it was telling me, because I had already invested so much into it. And because I wanted to see it come to the expectations that I had, I didn't pay attention to the red flags. Another big part of ignoring why I ignored the red, let me say that over again. Another big part on why I ignored red flags, especially in relationships, and I'm sure there's some people that could relate to this, is the fear of starting over. Now, would I had said that years ago when I was heavily into those relationships and not even aware that I was probably not even conscious that I was ignoring those red flags? No. But as I grew older, as I did the work, I started to realize that a very big part of me did not address red flags or did not take those red flags and move differently. It's because I had a fear of starting over. When you've invested your time, when you invested your emotions, time is something you can never get back. So to let go, sometimes it feels like you wasted that time. But I feel that, and what I know now to be true, is that it only feels like a waste of time when you have overstayed your time, you know? And those were the reasons why I ignored red flags. Another very big reason I forgot to mention, because my mind is going, I forgot to mention potential versus reality. A lot of times I ignored the red flags in a relationship because of the person's potential. And I didn't stay focused in that moment on the reality and what was going on, that I only seen the end, but I didn't see the middle. And I think it's very important, especially for relationships, for you to stay present and in the moment with your relationship, because when red flags do appear, you could have those discussions, you could talk about it, and you can make changes. And if changes don't happen, you can make the decision for yourself that if it's not aligning with what I know I want in my life, then I can make the mature decision to let that relationship go. I give myself grace, and I'm going to tell you why, because I wasn't as mature as I am today. And I still was deeply into my emotions and a little emotionally unstable at times, not completely, but when that time of the month comes. And when you're young, you kind of want what you want and your heart wants what you want, and your heart overrides logic, especially for women, So I give myself grace now that I know better. But those are the reasons why I ignored the red flags. I wanted it so bad. I invested all this emotional time. I had a fear of starting over, and I focused more on the potential instead of the reality. And all of those things blinded me from actually saying, hey, this is something that's going on here. This is a red flag. Let's talk about it. Because had we talked about it, maybe things would have been different. Who knows? But there are a few red flags that mostly pertaining to relationships that I want to share in this episode. And one of them is inconsistency. So inconsistency in a relationship is a red flag. That's me, my experience. You don't have to agree to it, but inconsistency in a relationship for me is a red flag. So let me give you a little story, okay? So I was in a relationship dating somebody, and they were very inconsistent. Every time I brought it up, they would make excuses. They would continue with their inconsistency. And this is what I told myself when I seen this red flag, okay? Listen, this is what I told myself. Eventually, he'll be more consistent. I really see his potential. Like, I really see where we could be. Like, this is me being naive and a little young and ignoring those red flags. No, sis. What the red flag was really telling me with his inconsistencies, because he was a little full of doo-doo sometimes, you know what I'm saying? What those inconsistencies was showing me was that he was not ready for the relationship that I wanted, that I thought I could be in at that moment. That's what it was telling me. But what I chose to do was to ignore those red flags, was to bring it up and then let it go, and then bring it up again and let it go, or just eventually after a while just ignore it and just go with the flow. And no, if you notice, we're not together. We didn't grow anywhere, and ignoring the red flags didn't get me too far, with him. And it didn't get me the relationship that I know that I'm worthy of. So what I have learned about that red flag inconsistency is that when a person wants to do something, they're going to do it. And there's no need for you to pull or for you to pressure or for you to force anybody. If somebody is going to keep their word, they're going to keep their word. And what that lesson has taught me completely is that I do not go off of what people say. I go off of what they do. And if what you do over time aligns up with what you say, then I could trust your word more and watch less of what you do. Okay? That's just the truth. So inconsistency is a red flag in a relationship, baby girl. And if I had listened to this when I was younger and had the self-worth to say, okay, you know what? All right, this is the pattern that you're on. I'm just not really on it. So I'm just going to move in the forward. We could be cool, no hard feelings. If I had that, I would say confidence in that area, I wouldn't have stayed too long. So just know, from my journey to your journey, inconsistency is a red flag. Bring it up. If there's change behavior, great. If there's none, it's up to you whether you want to stay or not. But now you know it's a red flag and it's telling you something. And for me, it told me that he was not ready to be in a committed, serious, evolving relationship. He wasn't ready for that. The last thing I want to say about inconsistency, sometimes in a relationship, what I have learned is that people are consistent and then they're inconsistent. When inconsistency happens, I don't think you just run away. You bring it up, you have a conversation, because sometimes people stop being inconsistent because, yes, they lose interest, or sometimes people stop being inconsistent because they want to play games. Some people are not consistent at all, you know what I'm saying, because that's just who they are. But then there's those people that they can't even be consistent in their own life and what they're going through at the moment. So they're not able to show up for you the way that they want to. And I think with a conversation, with deeper understanding, with relationships like that, it could separate in an amicable way, in a peaceful way, where there's no animosity or resentment or hurt or disappointment. You know what I'm saying? Not everyone's inconsistency is because they just want to play games and they jerks and they don't have anything to do with their time, or they're scared. Some people's inconsistencies, it's because they're going through something at the moment and they, unfortunately, they can't show up for themselves. So how in God's world are they going to show up for you? So let's keep that into perspective, right? Let's keep that in perspective. Now, my second red flag that I ignored so many times in a relationship was confusion. If you are a believer, which I am a believer, it says that confusion is the plan of the enemy, tactic, plan, whatever words they use in whatever different versions that you read. And I was in a situation where I was dating someone for a while. It's the same relationship, actually. I was dating someone for a while, and that person we were doing everything like a relationship was doing. We talked every day. He shared his personal life with me, what he was going through. We went to eat at times and every now and then dates. So when it got closer and closer, I was just like, okay, so what's really going on? Like, are we going to make this official? And it was always like, you take your time. God's working on you. I'm working on this and da 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 da. And it's like, eventually over time, we're going to grow into that and blah, blah, blah. And I was just completely confused. I was completely confused. But this is what I told myself. Even though the red flag was there of the confusion that he was putting me in, it's like, okay, that's great. You want to be in my face and benefit from a relationship, but then there's no title. And that whole no title thing, but I want to have every single aspect of you in a relationship, that's confusion. And confusion is a big red flag. What I told myself at that point in time is that I invested so much. I really want to see it through. I'm just going to be patient. The patient girl, the patient. It's okay to have patience with somebody who commits themselves to you, to someone that puts a ring on your finger and makes it official. That's what I know now to be true. Patience is great when you're dating, but after a while, when things are going well, and you're spending a lot of time together, you're enjoying each other's presence, ain't nobody got time to be confused about this and that and this and that and finding all these types of excuses. Confusion is a plan of the enemy to divide and to conquer. And I ain't got time for that. I want to be graced by God. The lesson that I have taken away from confusion, that red flag, if I was to ever see it again in the future, and I was ever put in a situation where I felt like there was mixed signals and there was confusion rather than clarity, I would bring it up. I would have a conversation. And if there was no clarity on exactly where this was moving to, I would cut ties and I would move forward, especially knowing that that is not something that I desire. I'm not dating just to date. I'm dating to eventually get into a relationship, to eventually get married. And if that's your desire, young lady, if that's your desire in life, then confusion is not a good sign. Confusion is a red flag. It's letting you know that there's a lack of clarity in that rapport that you're building with somebody, and the direction that you guys are heading to is unclear. So if you know that you have a clear direction of where you want to go, and that person is not aligning with that, then it's okay if you're not aligning together. But it's important for you to not think that confusion is going to lead to anything else besides for uncertainty. It's not going to make you feel secure, in the situation. You want to feel secure with the person you're dating and where you're going, and you want to evolve. But if you don't want to evolve, and if it's just like, hey, let's go with the flow, then that's fine too. That's your prerogative. But I'm speaking to the people who clearly understand what they want out of life and in a relationship. And confusion, if you want a healthy relationship, confusion is definitely a very, very, very big red flag. So, unreciprocated support is another red flag, and I apply this one mainly to friendships. When I was younger, I had a friend, and I had that friend for a very long time. I was the friend that she could always count on, and in many situations, she was not the friend that I could always count on. As we got older, we had that conversation, and I learned to understand a few things. But there came a point in time when I was getting to a place in my journey where I was just like, I need my friends to see me. I need my friends to know that even though I present strong and I've bounced back from a lot of things in life, I too need the support. And I need my friends to understand how to support me. And I came to that conclusion several years back where I was just like, this person's never going to see me for me. And in the moment and the years that we were friends, I oftentimes brushed it off. And I said, oh, that's just who she is. You know what I'm saying? Like when she comes around, she comes around, but it is what it is. But after a while, when I start to gain that wisdom and do my own inner work, I start to realize that this wasn't a healthy relationship, you know? And it's not a relationship that I want to continue to cultivate if it's not going to be healthy and rooted in truth. A part of me ignored that red flag in our friendship because I had invested emotionally and I knew her for so many years. And I'm sure people could relate to that. When you know somebody for so long, you tend to just let certain things go and ignore certain red flags, even though those red flags need to be spoken on. What it was telling me, that red flag in our friendship, when I look back, it's that she wasn't able to be a friend. You know, she was very self-centered and self-absorbed. And I wouldn't say selfish, because she could be selfless sometimes and she could be kind, but she was more centered around herself. And it's impossible to have a healthy relationship when someone is extremely self-centered. So the lesson that I took from that red flag, unreciprocated support, and when someone demonstrates that in a relationship, friendship, I have learned to, the lesson that I've taken from that. So when I see that red flag, I bring it up. And if change happens, that's great. And if change doesn't happen, I've learned to reposition those people in my life. That doesn't mean you have to cut people off, you know, and I had to learn that too, because I did let that person go. I didn't cut that person off, block them, do this, do that. No, I didn't do that. I did that after that person did something awful. Like, but I have learned that sometimes when the relationships are not reciprocal and they're not well balanced, you just have to reposition yourself, reposition them in your life, and reposition yourself in their life. But it doesn't have to be a war. You know what I'm saying? But it is a red flag. Healthy relationships are balanced relationships, are reciprocal relationships. And this is something that I have grown to understand after many disappointments, but I really value it moving forward because I want my peace. You know what I'm saying? And I want to be surrounded by peace, and I want to have healthy relationships. The last red flag, the last red flag, and then I'm done with this video. If you had to shrink yourself to be around people, listen, if you have to shrink yourself to be around people, don't do it. Don't do it. Like, don't do it. That is a red flag, clearly showing you that that is not a space for you to be in. Okay? It's not a space for you to be in at all. And I'm going to give you a quick story. I was working at a place that I learned so much from. I learned so much in my first career. It was amazing. I spent many years there. But at a point in time, I was walking into that workplace and I was feeling like I couldn't speak up or say certain things because the higher ups had a vision and had a certain way they function in there. And I realized that even if I speak on something, it will not be valued. So I shrunk myself to fit in, you know, and eventually when I couldn't do that anymore, I left. That red flag was God telling me that if you got to shrink yourself to come into this place every day, baby girl, you are not supposed to be here anymore. And that is the truth. Anywhere you have to shrink yourself, it's not for you. What that red flag was showing me at that moment is that, and that I was ignoring, and the reason why I was ignoring it, it's because I felt like I had put in so much into that workplace. So to now let it go, you know what I'm saying, and to now start over somewhere else, it's just like I felt like, shoot, it was a waste of time. But the reality is it's not a waste of time. That red flag was showing me that it was time to go. And it kept coming every single day. I was walking in there feeling like, oh my God, I have to be somebody else. I have to shrink myself. You know, I can't evolve. I'm not growing here. And I felt smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And I was just like, eventually that red flag, I was just pushed me right out of there. So the lesson that I have taken from that red flag is, one, never to ignore it. If you walk into a place and you feel like you have to shrink yourself to fit in, then that place is not for you. There's so many other red flags, let's be honest. There's so many other red flags, but these are the ones that I felt were very important and more significant to my journey. And this is what I wanted to share with you guys. At some point in time, like I often speak about, you have to realize the patterns that you're making in life. And while I went through and focused on the patterns in my life, I seen that there was so many times that there was red flags alerting me that something was off, you know? And what allowed me to change is that those patterns weren't comfortable anymore. Those patterns were bringing me disappointment, was helping me to get stuck, was frustrating. And in the process of me discovering certain things on my journey, I realized that there were so many red flags that I ignored. You know what I'm saying? That I ignored. And had I not ignored them, I would have been way more ahead of my journey instead of stagnant and stuck in certain situations that weren't allowing me to evolve anymore. So what I do differently now is, one, I pray for discernment. I remember this lady told me to pray for discernment because your patterns in life is because you're not seeing clear to certain things. And spiritually, she said something else, but let's put it in this world, it's red flags, you know? So I prayed for discernment, and now I discern things moving forward. And it's not a way to just point out everything that's negative, but it's also a way for me to understand and know that I'm aligning myself on the path that I need to be on. You know, I want to keep on that path. Yeah, sometimes I may come off, but I want to get right back on, you know? Another thing that I do differently is that I no longer listen to what people say. I watch what they do. And I think I said this in the beginning of the video. If what you do aligns with what you say, I learn to trust your word more and not always have to wait on your actions. I also let go, you know, I also let go when it's necessary to let go. That's what I do differently now. When the red flags are showing me these things and it's constantly showing me that this is what needs to happen, I do what needs to happen. And another thing that I do now when I see a red flag, I speak on it. I speak on it. Like, speak on it, bring it up, bring it to the table, see what happens from there. And from there, I know how to pivot and do what I need to do to keep myself on track. And those are the things that I do differently. You know, there's signs. And my mind is going right now with a whole bunch of thoughts, but there's signs, guys. And don't ignore the red flags, and don't run from them neither. The moment you see a red flag, you're like, I'm out of here. You know, like, no, like, talk about things, gain clarity, gain what you need to do next and what direction you need to go in. But don't just run away at every red flag, especially when it comes to relationships. You know what I'm saying? And when you're dating somebody, because a mature person will address things. A person that wants to be with you will adapt things and you guys could compromise. You know what I'm saying? But red flags should not be ignored. So speak up, be confident. And that's what I'm learning for myself, to speak up, be confident, be gentle, address matters that come to your concern, and don't ignore those red flags because it will cost you in the long run. I'm speaking from experience. And that's all. That's all I want to share with you guys today. It has taken me so long to get this video out, and I know the edit is going to be crazy. But thank you for kicking it with me for this episode. And leave me your thoughts and share with me if you're open to it on some of the red flags that you may have ignored. Don't be too hard on yourself. I'm learning that too. Don't be too hard on yourself for the things of the past. The best thing that you could do is learn and move forward differently for your future and your present moment. And I'm going to leave you guys there. So as always, stay fly, stay fabulous, stay focused, stay godly, stay prayed up, stay all the way up. And I'm going to go get my babies right now and have a beautiful day.